Hello, and welcome to Right in Front of My Face, the podcast talking about big things happening right in front of us. I am your host, Shannon Hull, and what a couple of weeks has been. I am behind on podcast releases. I am behind on what feels like almost everything, not just the podcast. With the overturning of Roe v. Wade on June 24th, I felt absolutely heavy with confusion, rage, and an overwhelming sense of powerlessness that I've been trying to wade through amidst family vacations, my kids being home on break, unending activities. Let me tell you that my discombobulation is real. The pivot that our country has taken during COVID feels completely detached. It feels scary, and it's beginning to feel more and more irreversible. I'm terrified for the future, and I don't know what to do. I'm sure so many of us are feeling this way, and I just want to take a second to validate it. None of us has answers. There's no definitive action to take, and women everywhere are scared and wondering how this could possibly happen in real life. But here's the thing. We still have to move forward. We moved through a pandemic. We've moved through women's rights before, so we have to and will keep moving forward. Because life is still happening. We're still here, raising our families and dealing with things that we can't predict. Life is still serving us things we have to deal with right now. It's still providing health scares that go beyond COVID, which brings me to the subject of this episode, unpredictable COVID pivots. Cassie Walker Johnson is my friend. She is a sponsor of this podcast. She's a successful real estate agent with her husband, Jeremy. She's a mom, a wife. She's an incredible networker and connector. And in December of 2020, she became a cancer patient. Right before Christmas, Cassie got the phone call that 1 in 7 women in our lifetime will get. The call from the doctor telling her that she has breast cancer. Now there's a COVID pivot. Over the next hour, Cassie is going to share her experience. So please know that we talk about breast cancer, surgery, and chemo. We also talk about helping our sisters in arms that get diagnosed and how we can best serve each other. Cassie's mom asked me yesterday if it was going to be a Silver Linings podcast, and I assure you that it is. This conversation is meant to serve as a tool. Cassie wants her experience to help others who get this diagnosis and also to help the family members learn how to best support a patient. It's also here to remind us that there are silver linings within the cancer diagnosis. Well, this is going to be an easy introduction, and I've never introduced a sponsor onto my podcast before, but I am delighted to introduce Cassie Walker Johnson to the audience. Cassie and her husband, Jeremy, are sponsors of season 4 of this podcast. Cassie is a friend of mine who's been on my personal board of directors for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And you have been a huge supporter of this podcast. You are at your heart a networker and have selflessly connected me with so many people. And unfortunately for you, got delivered a COVID pivot that you definitely did not want in the form of a breast cancer diagnosis.
Yeah.
So you are one of, I think, 5 women in my immediate circle who had this happen to them during COVID. And you have gone through this journey and shared yourself so openly with your friends through your blog, and really invited your friends into this process with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I have gotten to sit through you. I've gotten to sit with you through a chemo infusion.
Mm-hmm.
And you have turned this into a learning experience for all of your friends also. So first off, I want to thank you so much for being brave enough to share your story.
Thank you.
I know it's taken you a long time to get to this place where you feel like you can talk about it.
Yeah.
And so this interview is going to be a little bit more conversational than formal. And I am here to learn from you. But I know that countless people are going to benefit from the conversations that we're going to have. And we're going to cover a few different topics here, just so people are, fair warning before the podcast starts. We do talk about breast cancer diagnosis. We talk about chemotherapy, we're going to talk about how to help your friends that are potentially going through this, your friends or family members. So those are some trigger warnings for people. So if you feel like this episode is not going to be good for you, please skip to the next one. So Cassie, by all accounts, you are a totally normal human woman.
I'd like to say that. Yeah. Yeah. By all accounts, I was a normal woman who didn't have a history of breast cancer in my family, and was just fully shocked on December 23rd, 2020, when the doctor called and said, you have stage 2 breast cancer.
And you just went in for a routine mammogram, correct?
Yeah. And, I've never even had an extra ultrasound or anything. Like I have dense breasts, but I've never even needed to do any extra extensive, surveying of my breasts. And so I've always kept up with my mammograms. And even actually in COVID, where so many of us, put doctor appointments aside, I kept doing that mammogram. And, we'll talk about it later, but my big mission through this, and hopefully in this podcast, is if you haven't got your mammogram, to get it. And I know that there's recent studies that are saying, oh, you don't need to do it every year. Well, had I waited another year, this would be a way different story. And so because of that mammogram, it saved my life. I think the big thing is that, so when you're diagnosed with breast cancer, it's shocking. But what it also is that you get this new perspective on cancer in general and how many different kinds of breast cancer there is. Because, I guess ever since we were 16 and we have those self-exam placards that you hang on your shower, and they're pretty much telling you to look for like a hard P. I didn't have that. I couldn't feel my tumor. And in fact, I didn't feel my tumor maybe until right before I went into surgery, because it was in the duct. So it grew long. It wasn't like a hard P. So
interesting.
Yeah. And so that's the part where I would have never found it. My doctor, I actually had been in my regular checkup a month before, and she didn't, she did a breast exam on me and didn't find it either. So, and I think what I had was invasive ductal carcinoma, which invasive means that it has grown out of its shell, let's just say. So ductal meaning that it's in the milk duct, as opposed to that hard P that we're all looking for. Then carcinoma is cancer. So when I received the diagnosis, originally they thought it was stage 1. And then through various tests and everything, they determined it was stage 2, and it was because it was having tentacles that were growing out. So that was like the beginning of my journey.
So take me back for a second, because I went in for my routine mammogram, I don't know, a few months ago, and they found I also have dense breasts, which for our listeners who don't know, there are different types of breast tissue.
Right.
And there are those of us that have dense breasts, which just make it harder for the mammogram to read whatever is inside.
Yes.
So I had an abnormality, and I had to go back in and get an ultrasound. And the experience, obviously you were on the top of my mind, as were, so 1 in 8 women that day who went in and got a mammogram were not going to get an all clear.
Yeah.
Like I did. So I have had the ultrasound, but I have had a normal outcome. Tell me about, because I think so many people will be able to relate to this. Can you tell me about getting that call from your doctor? Because I feel like we need to be braced.
Yeah. I'll be honest, like my doctors didn't handle it well in the beginning. And it was a really frustrating experience for me for that month. Essentially what happened is I went in and I had my regular mammogram. And before I'm even outside of the building, my phone rings and I happen to answer it. And they're calling me in for an ultrasound. And I just like panicked. Like I panicked. I was like, wait,
so it was
what?
like that immediate?
It was that immediate. And I was like, okay, this doesn't feel like this is just a routine screen. And honestly, Shannon, the moment I got that call, I knew. I knew. I knew that this was not going to be. And, I had a lot of friends and family supporting me, and they're saying, oh, don't stress about it. Don't worry. And I was like, no, I know that this is cancer. So I go in for the ultrasound, and the doctor, I just still to this day, can't believe. Like, so they do the ultrasound and I asked to look at it and I can see this bright white star. And I look at that and then I look at the mammogram and I'm like, yeah, this is cancer. And I'm looking for reassurance from the doctor. And when it was the ultrasound tech, right? And then she goes, I'll be right back, comes back in with the doctor. And I'm like, oh, snap. We all know what this means.
And you're there alone.
I'm there alone. And the doctor, and I'm wearing a mask. Okay. Because we're in the middle of COVID. The doctor turns to me and says, no, like empathetic, like, wow, I'm really sorry about this. She says, well, it's probably stage 1 cancer. And I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Excuse my language. But I was like, and I'm like hysterically crying and I can't breathe because I have to leave my damn mask on. And I was in shock. I was in total shock. And I walked out of there by myself and I went home. So this is a part where the story kind of begins with my involvement because I have a husband and I have at the time, 12-year-old daughter. She's now 13. And there are people who get diagnoses like this and they want to process it themselves before they go home and tell their loved ones or their family or their children or anything like that. As you know, Jeremy and I are in the middle of our constant remodel and we're in a small space and there was nowhere to hide. And so I had to walk in the door in tears with both my husband and my daughter looking at me and wanting to know what was wrong. So I was forced to share my story immediately. And I'm so grateful that I did. Like so grateful because trying to break the ice with a daughter to tell her that there's possibility of cancer is really hard to do. And so I kind of just ripped the Band-Aid off right away. So they did the ultrasound. They called me back and they said, we need you to come in for a biopsy. I was like, okay. So this is like mid-December. It's like the 15th of December, right? So we're, focused on Christmas and all of a sudden my whole world has just shifted. They're like, okay, well, we'll see you on January 8th. And I was like, you seriously going to make me wait an entire month for this and go through the holidays and pretend like everything's fine and not panic. And that's where I was like, okay, this is where medical care is not okay to make women wait that long. I called my sister who has been my rock through this entire process. And she had some connections. That was a Friday. And by Monday, I was at SCCA, Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, now called Fred Hutch Cancer Center, on Monday getting a biopsy. And by Wednesday, which was the 23rd of December, that's when I got the call.
So you had this whole process expedited because you knew somebody. What would coming from a place of teaching, what would your advice be if like, this is me calling you saying, holy God, I just had this weird mammogram. They want me to wait, which by the way, when I had my weird mammogram, the hospital that I went through absolutely was going to make me wait 8 weeks for a follow-up ultrasound.
It's not okay.
And so, I was super aggressive like you. And I was like, oh, hell no. Mm-hmm. And I started calling around and I got, multiple appointments much sooner. So is your advice to people get aggressive with it?
Yeah. Push your way through. Really push your way through. And it's interesting because you and I have talked about this before, but in the beginning, like when this first started out, when I got the diagnosis, I had sent a message to my primary care physician and said, oh, by the way, because she knew I was with her hospital at the time. So she knew I was getting the mammogram and the ultrasound. And I was like, it's cancer. And she responds with, ugh. And that was it. She didn't send me a message of empathy. She didn't pick up the phone. And I was like, oh, hell no. Like this, I'm done with this doctor. Like this is not okay. And it was a woman too. It wasn't like it was some like old white dude who couldn't empathize. This was like a woman. So anyways, that was the point of like, I will no longer settle for half-ass doctors. And when I say half-ass, it's not just because their expertise might be amazing, but someone who makes me feel heard, someone who assures me that they are going to listen and take care and give me all the options. And when I walked into SCCA, that was what I got. So what happens, so anyway, so I got set up with this amazing rock star, all female team. And this is a point now in my experience where I will tell anybody, even if it's your dentist, if you are not happy, then find somebody new because there are better doctors out there.
And not every doctor is a fit for every patient. Right. This is something that I agree with you so emphatically, but is so hard for so many people to do because we're afraid we're going to hurt somebody's feelings.
Yeah.
We're afraid we're going to, burn a bridge. We're afraid, but I cannot stress enough, even through your own experience, the importance of if you are not comfortable, it is okay to say, I am not comfortable and I would like a second opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. And even like now I've actually been through 2 primary care physicians. I've finally found the right match. And that's even since this experience. But this experience taught me that, especially, we have babies, we have, we're going to the gynecologist since we're 16 years old, right?
Yep.
And we constantly are doing what we can to take care of our health, but we're not really focusing on the doctors that are doing it for us. And I'm not here to poo-poo doctors. I'm here to say there's a doctor for everybody. And you just need to make sure you find that right one.
So you get diagnosed officially December 23rd.
Yeah.
When do you meet with this team?
So what happened?
And sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
And let people know how the process works.
Yeah. It's amazing. And I will talk about SCCA, their program and what they do. And there are cancer centers across, the nation, across the world that do the same focus. And it was so crucial because there was an entire team who was looking out for me. And so I had my diagnosis and it was beginning of January. I think it was like January 5th. They call you in for a 5-hour appointment and they put you in a room and your team of doctors come through. So all 3 came in. So in my situation, what I had was a medical oncologist, which is the one who will prescribe the chemotherapy. I had the radiation oncologist who would do the radiation work. And then I had the cancer surgeon. So she was the one that was going to remove the tumor.
So to put this team together, and correct me if my understanding is wrong, they kind of take every case that comes through and they sit down with like a case board and they assign it out to whoever would be most appropriate to your type and stage of cancer, right? So they kind of like have a meeting about you.
Yeah.
And then you have their meeting with whoever they've kind of picked for you. Is that how it works?
Not necessarily picked for you. I mean, they each have their own expertise, but because Seattle Cancer Care Alliance has a breast oncology department, it just happened that I got connected with Sarah Javit, who's head of that. So, but what they did do was after I go through and I do a CAT scan and I do an MRI, and let me tell you that MRI is not fun. And all the information, they go to a board. And so my tumor board was 27 individuals who took a look at my case. So when I met with these doctors and I'm sitting in this room for 5 hours, there's like almost over 30 professionals who have evaluated just me. And how amazing is that? And at first I was like, oh, we don't really need that. But then what I found out was that I actually had kind of a unique situation that had befumbled some of them. So I had my tumor, but then what happened was that there were signs of cancer in my lymph nodes, and lymph nodes are they run from your armpit to the base of your neck. So there's 3 levels. So imagine it like a 3-story house. So you have your base level, you have your second level, and then you have your third level. The reason why people focus on the lymph nodes is because when you have breast cancer, if it expands and leaves the breast, it's going to go through your lymph node to other parts of the body, like your brain, your liver, your lungs, or wherever that may be. So anytime you have cancer of any kind, they always want to check the lymph nodes because that's like the highway to the rest of the body.
And the lymph node progression is how they determine staging, correct?
No, staging is based on your tumor itself.
Oh, okay.
But the treatment is determined by where did they get to your lymph nodes? Did they go beyond your lymph nodes? What did that look like?
Got it.
So for example, ironically, my college roommate just got diagnosed exact same cancer as me. We're wondering if it's all those chimichangas we ate.
And we always
After
want
bar
to
tours.
assign blame too, right? We always want to assign blame.
But she caught hers even earlier, and she is stage 1 and nothing in the lymph nodes. So she had a lumpectomy and she would just have radiation.
Okay.
In my situation, what happened was there was cancer in my second level of lymph nodes, but not on the first. So imagine if a house is flooded on the second floor and the third floor is dry and the basement's dry. How did it get there? Where'd the water come from? So in this case, it was like, where did the cancer come from? How did it skip through my first and hit the second? So that was the kind of mystery. And so they talked a lot about what my treatment would look like. My actual tumor, it is defined as stage 2, ER meaning estrogen, HR meaning, ER meaning estrogen, PR meaning progesterone positive. So it's a hormone tumor. Its food is hormones, and HER2 negative. When I walked in for this 5-hour meeting, the oncologist looks at me and she's like, well, you have the boring cancer. I was like, what? No, I don't do boring. Like, what the heck? So, it's so reassuring. She's like, this is the cancer to have. This is the one we have studied and we know so much about. And also the impact of treatment will be less than, your, HER2, triple negative or triple positive, all the different kinds of tumors. So these 3 doctors came in, they all met with me. They all, did exams, and then they all each individually came back and walked me through my treatment. So I walked out of there 5 hours later, exhausted, ready for a cocktail. And I had a plan.
Which is what action people need.
Yes. It's so true. It's so true. Like I walked out of there and like Jeremy looked at me and he's like, how are you feeling? And I'm like, I got a plan. I can do this. Like I know what to expect. Because the thing about cancer is that when you're a type A control freak, it's a lot like motherhood. Like you can't control cancer itself. Like you can't really control the birthing process, laboring. Like you can have a plan, but we all know that it never comes to fruition the way you want. And cancer is the same way. So you can decide to swallow, let it swallow you, or you can decide to swallow it. And what I chose was to swallow it and say, I'm going to consume this. Like this is going to become my life, but not in a negative way. Like in the way of saying, I'm going to take control of how my body and my mind will respond to this. And I wasn't willing to let that go.
So you got some good advice from a friend because I think as women, most of us at this point in our midlife know somebody who's been through it. Tell me about this advice you got because it really resonated with me when you said it because I know it resonated with you.
Another one of my closest friends who's also named Shannon went through this experience several years ago when she was in Singapore and her treatment was a little different than mine. And she was in a much different situation, both being international and away from family and that stuff. But the one thing she said to me is she was really good about always being real with me, and she said to me, she's like, you need to make this your full-time career. And I was like, okay, I can do that. Like, luckily I was in this level of privilege where my business of real estate partnering with my husband, he was able to immediately take over everything. It took a little bit of, let's say, tug of war between us because I was struggling in the beginning with letting it go. And then what happens is when you go through chemo, your brain becomes real foggy. And there was something that I had sent. It was a file. It was like a transaction. I sent the wrong transaction and it didn't ruin anything. But that's when I was like, oh, snap. And he turns to me. He's like, you ready to let go? And I was like, yeah. And so what I was able to do was let go of work so that I could make this my full-time career. And then my oncologist said to me, use your energy to focus on your family and your daughter and your healing. And so that's what I did.
Talk to me a little bit about your philosophy around calling on your tribe because, because I remember our conversation when you told me right before Christmas, and there was nothing shy about it. There was nothing, you were like, this sucks. And we're like, this sucks. Like, how are we going to do this? But not everybody has that response and everybody's allowed to have whatever response they have. But I want you to talk about yours.
Yeah.
Because it is different. And I kind of want to hear about your mindset when you said, okay, I'm going to let people into this.
Yeah. So, when I got the call with the diagnosis, it was December 23rd. We were driving home from my sister's house and my daughter and my nephew were in the back of the car. And we just had this like fun kind of Christmas, gathering with my sister's family. Luckily, we had actually quarantined. So we were still deep in COVID. We had quarantined for 2 weeks and tested and everything so that we could have our whole family together for Christmas, which my God, thank goodness. because I was able to receive all the hugs and all the love and the support from my family and be able to see them in person and hug.
Yeah.
But she's in the back of my car and I'm on the phone and the tears are just like strolling down, and Jeremy is driving, and he knew as soon as like I got that call and he saw my face, he knew. And so he decided to drive us around and look at holiday lights while I could finish the conversation. And then we went home, and then I stood in the basement and we just cried, and he just held me. And it meant that even for my daughter, I had to be vulnerable, and I needed her to know about resilience and let her see that, yeah, I'm scared. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen, but we're going to get through this, and we're going to fight this, and we're going to be okay. And it was really sweet because at one point she turns to me and she's like, because Jeremy's mom also had breast cancer. And so when Tatum and I were talking about it, she says to me, Mom, Gigi had breast cancer and she was fine. So you're going to be fine. And I was like, okay, like that's real simple teenager logic. Like somebody else was fine. You're going to be fine too. What that did was started a moment for me where I needed to, I didn't have an opportunity to hide my story. When you go through this experience, the challenge that I had was I have this public persona as a real estate agent, and I partner with my husband. And then I have this private persona, which is my community that I are near me and I love and adore. I consciously decided that I was not going to make it public on social media as far as like my, Johnson and Walker on Instagram and Facebook and that kind of stuff. Because what I was fearful that people would turn and say, oh, Cassie has cancer. Jeremy's taking care of her. We can't, we shouldn't give her any business. And then we needed the business. It was like, A, we got to keep our career going. And B, Jeremy needs to keep busy,
Yeah.
to give him some sanity from everything else that was going on. But I also knew that I had this community, and I knew that I needed to share because it helped me heal. And everybody heals in their own way. Everybody handles trauma or a cancer diagnosis or a loss of a friend or family member in their own way. For me, I knew myself well enough to know that sharing my story was the way that was going to help me heal. When you start telling people, it gets really overwhelming. It just gets super overwhelming. And at some point, you kind of get exhausted from delivering the message. And that's when I started to do the blog and thought, you know what, I'm just going to do this here and share, my story and what's happening so that I'm not having to text and email and call, everybody, because it got a little overwhelming. In that, Shannon, there was this beginning of just feeling so vulnerable. And I think it's because, I'm the doer, I'm the networker, I'm the connector. I'm the one that is constantly like, you're like, okay, I'm thinking about, waterproofing my back deck. And it's like, okay, here's the person. Somebody comes to me and they're like, I'm thinking that I want to get into fashion design. Okay, let me connect you with this person. Like I've just always been that connector.
I mean, you are the first person I text for literally everything that I need.
And, I love being resourceful and I love to help people. When you are in this position, there is that moment of silence and the calm before what I've experienced was the storm of, will anyone be there for me? And I was overwhelmed by the generosity and the love and the storm that came towards me, and the most random people who expressed in their way love, support, I'm here for you, and all that kind of stuff. And that was like my daily, uplift that really got me through this. And so much so because, like Jeremy was there on a daily basis to physically take care of me. My mother-in-law came in town for a couple of weeks and took care of Tatum. And then my family was there, but you feel kind of bad and guilty complaining to your partner who's taking care of you physically, who's literally like, making sure you're eating and getting your meds and all that kind of stuff because I had a pretty extensive surgery. So I turned to my friends for that emotional support. And there were two people who were very, very supportive with me through this, who I couldn't see. One was my best friend in San Diego, who wasn't physically present, but called me every single day. And the other was my sister. And she was like my rock, who just really, truly checked on me every single day. She would go and walk her dog every day and call me and just be like, and that's where I could be really real, because it was like, I didn't feel guilty about, turning to my husband and saying, this really freaking sucks. But I could with them. And then there were so many people. I mean, it was really overwhelming.
So you started the blog, kind of sent it out to your community.
Yeah.
And I would say we all got it, right? Where we didn't, I mean, I think there is a hesitancy in the community to say, I don't want to bug her.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to bug her husband. But by allowing people a little peephole into what you're going through, it helped a ton. And there were obvious things like a meal train that happened.
Yeah.
But talk to me about deciding to open up your infusion appointments.
Yeah. And this came back from my same friend, Shannon. And the best advice she gave me was, don't open up, for people to sign up to come with you on your infusion appointments. Choose who you want to be in the room with, and then decide, and send those invitations out. So let's just talk a little bit about what my treatment was. So essentially, we'll talk about that, and then we can talk about the rest of it. But essentially what happened was I got the best silver lining of this entire process, and I was able to get a breast reduction and lift. And I love my tatas, and I was so excited about that.
I know when you told me, I was like, oh God, really jealous. I'm sorry that you're going through cancer, but that sounds amazing.
I mean, I was like leaping down the hall on the way. Like when I went in for my surgery, I literally was leaping down the hall, and I was so excited. It also helped that I found this amazing plastic surgeon as well. Shannon Colahan at UW was absolutely fabulous and just made me feel so good through the whole thing. So what happened was I had my surgery. So in my surgery, because they did a reduction lift, they were able to access everything in one surgery. And because I wasn't doing implants or reconstruction, they were able to do it, because often, like, let's say you have a double mastectomy and then you have to go through radiation, let's say, you can't do implants or reconstruction until you're through all of your treatment. But because they're using my original breast tissue, they were able to do this before I started my treatment. So I went in for my surgery. They removed the cancer tumor, and they ended up removing 2 lymph nodes in that second level of, but they were able to access it all at once. They did the reconstruction on both sides, and that was a lot to recover from.
Yeah, it's a big surgery.
Yeah, big surgery that my poor sister and husband had to, view quite a bit. And then I was healing for about a month, maybe a little bit more, and then I started my treatment. So I had hormone-based cancer. And what this means is the solution on how to get rid of it is to put you in full-blown menopause. When the technology that is available now, you guys, is just so fascinating. So first of all, they have a new test, and it's sometimes called oncotype testing, or it's also called a mammoprint. They now can take your tissue from your tumor, from your DNA, they send it off to the lab, and they come back with results based on your chance of reoccurrence. So it's not a study of 20,000 women who had this kind of cancer. They now can really pinpoint things to just you. And this is only technology in the last couple of years. So mine came back and they said, you have a 93% chance of reoccurrence. If you do treatment, then you have a 13% chance of reoccurrence.
So you could have potentially not done any more treatment after your surgery?
Potentially, yeah.
If you had chosen not to.
Exactly.
Got it.
I mean, anyone can make that choice.
Right.
My chances are much higher because of my age. At the time, 48, now 49 years old. So they are looking at, okay, you're not 80 years old. There's some, like, my aunt actually just got diagnosed with the exact same cancer, ironically, too. And the first time they said was, we're just going to do a lumpectomy. This time they're doing radiation and chemo, but it depends on your age.
Yeah.
Too,
okay.
Because they looked at life expectancy and is it worth it? So what they diagnosed, or not, what they prescribed to me was 24 rounds of chemo and 6 weeks of radiation. The kind of chemo that I had is what you call chemo light. So I took a pill every single day for 12 weeks. And then I had a port installed, which is essentially, it's like a pin cushion that's in your upper left chest or right, depending on where they go. It's just under the skin. And that allows them to do all your blood work and your actual infusions without having to constantly be pulling, veins from your arms and all that stuff. It makes it much more comfortable, even though I hated the device so much.
Yeah. I don't think anybody loves it.
Yeah, no. So then I had infusions once a week. And so there was 2 types of chemo that I received once a week on Mondays. And then I took an oral pill every single day.
And that's 24 weeks that you went through this.
Yeah. So I did 12 weeks of that. I had a month break.
Okay.
I did 6 weeks of radiation. I had a month break. And then I did another 12 weeks. So it was a full year of treatment. My thought was, okay, this infusion is going to take about 3 hours. The process itself, actual chemo, you saw it. It was only a hot 20 minutes of work, but here's 3 hours that I get to have with somebody I really want to be with. And that was such a gift because what it did is allowed me to look forward to the infusion because you get a little nauseous. I had so many different side effects, but usually the day after that evening, you're just kind of feeling a
little rough.
Wonky. Yeah. So, like you, it was like, okay, come experience this with me. Some people, I'm sure it made them a little queasy, but I got to pick my 24 closest people and bring them with me.
Well, do you mind if I talk about it for a second from the friend perspective?
Yeah.
Because, I have known so many people who have gone through this. And again, it's different for everybody and every reaction is fine. But I had never had the insight of seeing it.
Yeah.
And I was nervous going into it because you just want to be like, okay, well, I got to hold it together. Like, what are we going to do? Let's bring our laptops. We're going to, magazines. But you pull into the parking lot at the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance. And the thing that struck me, well, there were 2 things. One was it was completely full.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The second one was that there was literally every car, make, model that you could picture.
Cancer doesn't discriminate.
So you're kind of going through and you're like, wow, there's not a parking spot in here. This is pretty crazy. And then you go into the lobby and you and I met in the lobby. Mm-hmm. And again, it was COVID. So we're all wearing masks, which is like weird anyway. But it was literally every age, nationality, skin color. It was the most diverse group of people. And I remember sitting in that lobby thinking, oh my God, I mean, there is no one that this hasn't touched.
Yeah.
And here is my friend in with this group. This could very well be my reality at a certain point. And I had never experienced it before. So I was sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, this is what this is. And I've had people really close to me have to go there and get an infusion. And I never knew what it looked like. So then we go sit in the room and your attitude was amazing. Like you were upbeat, even though you knew that the next week was going to be probably pretty junky. Mm-hmm. And I watched you advocate for yourself. And we just sat in a room for 3 hours shopping online and reading magazines.
Don't listen to that, Jeremy Johnson.
It was mostly me.
Yeah,
actually.
right. Exactly.
It was mostly me. But to get to experience that in that way was so intimate. And I mean, you don't ever want to say that cancer brings you something good, but I feel like it deepened our friendship that day. And I was so thankful that you were willing to welcome me into those moments, because it's like, this is where the real stuff is in that room. That is where the real feelings are. That is what all of this is. And because no one is spared, I felt like I learned a lot.
I'm so glad that you got to share that experience with me. And I think that for me, what it did was I was able to focus on you and make sure you were okay to help me cope with it. And so it was definitely like a win-win for both of us to have that connection time, but also to have this opportunity to help share this experience with you and see what it's really like. And like I said before, it's, I made a conscious decision to swallow it, but not let it swallow me, to, embrace it, to make it my career. And it was like, okay, when you have a job, you have job duties. You don't like to do everything. You don't get along with everybody, but this is your career. And that was the best advice I could have ever had, because it just allowed me to focus 100% on it and control it as best I could when I couldn't control the actual cancer itself.
So you recovered from surgery, you go through chemo, you go through radiation, you get breaks. You are now on the other side of it. But I think there's something important to note is that just because your treatment is over, it does not mean your experience with cancer is over. And I want you to talk about that.
Yeah. When you are forced to go through treatment that is a year long, it's a little different than someone who is diagnosed with other cancers where they do the more heavier chemo, where you look sick, you lose your hair, you're, vomiting violently. For me, what happened was that first phase, I was really nauseous, and thanks to some amazing THC products, it really helped me get through that. And then, radiation itself for me was actually quite a bit of a break, because the one thing that, as I said before with chemo, it kind of breaks your brain. Like you just really can't, it's daily duties. Like, okay, I'm going to fold some laundry today. Okay, I'm going to make some toast today. Like it gets real basic. And with radiation and the breaks that I had, that really helped me to get my brain back. And when you are a highly productive A-type personality, to lose your brain, I think that was probably the worst part, to be honest. And the last part, part of the chemo was a lot rougher for me. And in fact, I had a point where my numbers just went down, and I had to stop taking chemo for a week just to take a break. Because what happens is they're looking at your white blood cell count. And if it gets below a number, it means that your body is not going to be able to recover as easily. And, you're fighting other things as opposed to just the cancer. So you spend an entire year holding your breath. And so come January, I was like ready to exhale, then got COVID. And so I spent another month of recovering, and luckily I'm fine. So I'm in this phase of exhaling and building my strength again. And it's not easy. There are times when I feel frustrated. Through this whole year, I got to see some amazing people, some amazing love, some amazing amount of support. And then I did see a few that, frankly, I don't talk to anymore. And it was just the response that just was shocking, and decided that I can't focus on that. I have to focus on these amazing women and friends and men that just stepped up to support me. So there's some processing of that, because even in that entire situation, this is the part, and this is where I'm going to be really real and really honest. Nobody can say the right words to take your cancer away, right? And so when people are feeling like, well, I don't know what to say. Well, guess what? I don't remember, Shannon, I don't remember the words you told me.
Right.
I remember the actions. I remember you showing up with a tray of meatballs for our dinner, picking me up for, my chemo. I remember how our friendship started because I had that foot surgery, and you're like, do you need me to come and pick you up and drive you around to, do Christmas shopping? And I was like, oh, wow, that is so specific. And all I can do is say yes or no. And I'm going to say yes. Right.
Yeah.
So, I remember actions. Me as a patient, I don't remember words. And so what I do remember is the people that reached out and said, I don't know what to say, but I want you to know I'm thinking of you today. I had people who texted me just like heart emojis and just let me know that they're sending their thoughts, even if they didn't know what the right words were to say. There were other people who took great action. And, the one thing about this that I hope that I can bring to light is how to help people. We've talked about that. And if you can propose to somebody a sample or an example of how to help, and the only answer is yes or no, then you're doing the right thing. So when I had someone who would say, would it be helpful to you if I picked Tatum up after school and took her for a treat and a snack and brought her home later? Yes. Would it be helpful if I had my husband call Jeremy and have him go play golf? Yes. Would it be helpful if I mowed your lawn? No. Jeremy's very picky about that. So giving, when people came to me and proposed me yes and no questions, then it was so easy to receive, because it is really hard. from day one, it is really, really hard to accept the love and the support and all the things, the meal trains and all that kind of stuff. If there's nothing that you got from this entire podcast today, please know that please take out of your vocabulary, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. Because what you have done is then put it on me to tell you how you can help me.
And you don't know.
Yeah.
Like, it would be great if you could come up with a cure for cancer.
Yeah. That'd be awesome.
That would be ideal.
But there was and that's where we talk about I had to practice a lot of forgiveness, because there were a lot of people who didn't know that was not helpful to me. And of course I know yes, they're thinking about me and I love them and I don't want to sound ungrateful, but that was the worst thing someone could say to me, because I just was okay, well, I'll
talk to you never.
Yeah. Because the last thing I'm gonna do is call up and be like, oh, hey, can you, go get me some groceries? No, I'm not going to do that. So so that was one phrase that was really hard to hear. The other phrase that often I would run into people, because while there was this public persona where people didn't know what was going on, and then there was the private, and those, the people following the blog that knew what was going on, they would see me, but feel guilty because they hadn't reached out. And so they would turn to me and say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I've been meaning to call you. And I'm like, bullshit. And what I want to say to those people is here's the deal. I know you didn't know what to say. And so you became overwhelmed with the thought of not being able to know what to do. And so you never reached out. And I know that's the phase, and I know that's the thinking, and that's okay. So what I would then challenge people is say, okay, wow, I've been following along on your blog. How are you doing? The last thing I'm recording is when the last time I heard from you and when the last time I saw you, because I've got so much in my brain that's half functioning anyways. So if you have heard the story, you feel guilty because you haven't reached out. Don't put your guilt on them. Don't make them reassure you that it's okay. Just say, I've been following along. How are you? So there's little things like that. I had a friend whose husband was in hospital for an extended period of time, and she has 2 teenagers. And even myself, I get a little challenged on how to help people. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, what are the things that are the bane of my existence? One is stopping to get gas. The other is going to the grocery store. And the third is making school lunches. And I was like, okay, school lunches. So Tate and I got together and we made a grab and go pack, a week of all the things for school lunches, all prepackaged, fruit, vegetables, snacks, all the things, so that all she had to do for a week, or literally could tell the kids to open their lunch bag, pick what you want, and your lunch is made. And still she gets back to me and was like, that was the best thing that ever happened.
Totally.
So when you do a meal train, it doesn't always have to be a dinner. It could be lunches for the week. It could be a quiche breakfast, or, so I
do think we get locked into thinking about these things. I had a friend get COVID, and she had 3 little kids, and I was at Target, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna get some coloring books and some bath chalk and just deliver stuff to do.
Yeah.
Because at that point the quarantine was still 14 days.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that's actually helpful.
Yeah.
People's freezers fill up, and a lot of times cooking, you like doing that. It can be therapeutic.
Yeah.
But it is hard to know what to do. That's a brilliant idea.
Yeah. And I think it's you think about the things that, I was part of a nonprofit organization, and one of our employees' husband was going through a real severe cancer and treatment. And we all just got together and put a fund together and sent a landscaper to her house, because they had a very large yard. And it was like, okay, well, we'll take care of the yard, so you don't have to worry about it. So it's so easy to help, but it's hard to, I think it's easier to help than to turn to somebody and say, how can I help you? Just come up with something. Because the other thing is that you are proposing what you are capable and comfortable doing.
Right.
I'm not going to offer something to you that I don't want to do.
Right. I'm not going to come offer to paint your house for you.
Yeah. I'm not going to pick up your dog poop. That's just not my thing. I'm not going to offer to walk your dog. Not okay with it. Yep. But I will go to the grocery store. I will put together lunches. I'll do whatever I need to do to support you in the ways that are comfortable for me. And so, as the receiver, when someone came to me with a proposal that all I could say is yes or no, I'm like, they've thought through this. They're not going to propose this unless they really want to do it. And so then it was much easier to receive. I'll tell you one other thing. I have a acquaintance, and our daughters went to preschool together, and it was so sweet because she found out about the story a little bit later, or my diagnosis, I should say. And she's like, well, I'm just going to make you laugh every day. And still to this day, it's been like 6 months. She sends me like random reels and random memes through Instagram. And I get them on a daily basis from her of just random stuff that I'm like, that was funny. And I still get them.
But I think that little stuff is helpful. And it's so hard. You know, I think we will all be in this position eventually, being like, I feel so helpless. And sometimes it is just throwing that text out to be like I had on Mondays when you went in for your infusions. I tried my hardest to just say, hey, like I'm with you today.
Yeah.
Thinking about you. And, you know, it's not anything super tangible, but as a friend, you're like, so that's all I can do.
Yeah. And I think it's perfectly fine to say, I don't know what to say, but I'm thinking about you. Like that, those messages were profound to me because, you know, like I said, your words are not going to take away my cancer, but the way you make me feel, I will remember forever.
Yeah. Cassie, where are you today?
Yeah.
In your process?
I'm cancer free. The great news was when they did my surgery, they declared me cancer free. I did a whole body scan and there was no other cancer anywhere. So the follow-up treatment was to keep it from coming back. I now take a drug called tamoxifen. So I am full blown in menopause at 49 years old, which has its challenges, but I guess it's better than, you know, getting cancer again. That's for sure. I am healthy and I'm working right now a lot on building my physical strength. You know, an entire year of not moving did, you know, a good job on my body. So I'm taking some online Zoom workout classes with my mom and her senior citizen friends. And you know, you got to start somewhere.
That's awesome.
I went and took a Pilates class with you at the Pilates Hub after your other podcast and love that. So I'm working on building my physical strength. You know, the mental part, there's still moments where I get a little bit like, holy shit, I just went through an entire year of this. And then COVID. Yeah. And just, I think, you know, finding that balance of who do I want to be now? You know, and I think all of us went through this in COVID. It was like, I am not the carpool mom that's going to drive my kids to 5 different destinations every day any longer. I think a lot of us made some life changes in COVID and saying that, you know, we're enjoying the time off. We're enjoying the downtime. You know, who I am today versus 3 years ago is a completely different person. And I'm really happy with it. And so it's really forced me to further stop and smell the roses a little bit more and slow down a little bit more and, you know, experience life with my husband and with my daughter, with my family, and just continue to, you know, love the friends and the community that helped get me through this. The other part is that my healing comes with helping others. And so literally I was just at SCCA a couple of days ago with my college roommate who is going through the treatment. And I got to hug my radiation oncologist, and now she's working with my roommate and just helping others really get through this. And that helps me heal a lot.
I mean, this is a serious trauma.
Yeah.
And just living with that fear over you for a year is a lot. Yeah. And do you think that you will be able to get out from under that?
Yeah. I mean,
and two questions. One, can you get out from under it? And two, what advice do you have for anybody listening that has just gotten that call from their doctor?
Yeah. I think the first part is that I was never under it. I was in it.
Interesting.
And so it was full consuming, but that was the way I was able to process it. So I decided, as I said in the beginning, I wasn't going to let it swallow me. I was going to consume it. I was going to swallow it. I was going to dig deep into it and just be it. That helped me get through it all. So when you're not sharing with your community and pretending like everything's okay, when you're not sharing the story with your family, when you're not sharing the story with your kids, like all of those things, like the more you hold it in, let me tell you, the harder it's going to be, because people by nature, your community by nature, they want to help. They want to support. I mean, when's the last time you told someone something traumatic and they're like, oh, I'm sorry for you, Shannon, I got to go. Like,
gotta go get my groceries.
Exactly. Like people aren't like that in nature. So I don't live in fear. I did the work. It sucked. When we were talking in, early December, late November, it really sucked. And I was in bed 3 to 4 days a week.
But you were honest about it every step of the way.
Yeah.
Like there was never a part of you that was trying to shelter me from that.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that because it allowed me to be there with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that was super important. Like that to me was like, I'm going to be real through this whole thing. My advice for somebody who just got that call, for one, is to find your person other than your partner, because that person, they'll shine up. You don't need to go find them. They will come to you and they'll come through, and it may not be somebody you are super close with, but you'll need that person. You may need a couple of them. Like I had a couple. And then I think you just have to decide, okay, look at your two choices. Are you going to choose to make this your life for the next whatever it is? Or are you going to choose to avoid it at all costs? It doesn't mean you have to be happy-go-lucky every day. There's this amazing article that came out. I'll email it to you. Maybe you can put it in the notes. And it was like the summary of this woman who had breast cancer and was feeling guilty because she couldn't be positive. And she was like, all these other people are telling her, well, just be positive, just think happy thoughts and all the things. And she's like, this fucking sucks. And I am not happy. And she's going to a counselor, a therapist who's like talking it through with her. And like at the end of the article, the therapist says, I'll have you know, I've had some of the biggest bitches come through here and they survived cancer. So, it doesn't always have to be like this happy-go-lucky, always think positive. I was very clear, in my blog, there were some really bad moments, but overall in general, I called that blog Silver Linings. And it was like, at the end of the day, there's something I can learn from this, from every moment. And I want to be able to learn from it so I can share it with others and support other people.
I'm anxiously awaiting the book.
Silver Linings Playbook. Yeah. I've had a couple people who have reached out and, want me to share the story, the advice, all the things that you don't learn from the doctors. And I really want to do that. I'm hoping, soon that process will come. Right now, I'm just trying to recover from, not working for a year, supporting, the business and being mom and all that kind of stuff. But it'll be there. It's coming soon.
Well, Cassie, my greatest hope is that this will hit somebody listening.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I've never been included in somebody's process. And for me, pulling the veil back off of it, because as women, I do feel so strongly that there's this pressure to say like, I'm fine. I don't need help.
Yeah.
I've got it. But for those among us who can say, I actually will receive the help. Yes, please take my child after school, in small increments and accept it. It seems like it deepens friendship so much.
Mm-hmm.
And without, if you allow people to give that selflessly without expecting anything in return, I just think the phrase that you said, letting people shine up, really resonated, because there are those people out there for us. Mm-hmm. And I think when we put on this armor of like, no, I've got to do this alone. No one can help me. This has got to be a journey that I take by myself. This is some interesting insight into what that other side of the coin looks like.
There's no trophy for doing it alone. There's no trophy. There's no award. There's no big award ceremony of like, congratulations, Cassie, you did this all by yourself.
Seattle Cancer Care doesn't, give you a bigger bell if you do it by yourself at the end of treatment.
No, you don't. Like, so why not end that journey with a whole new, stronger community around you? And why not share your story and help others? I mean, that's just It's in my nature. That's who I am. So I'm not going to like suddenly not do that. And I'm excited that you've given me this platform to share it with the rest of the world, essentially. Now that we're beyond treatment, and back at work and all the things, I'm excited for the community to know. And I also want to just put this out there. Reach out to me. If you've been diagnosed with breast cancer and you have questions, call me, like email me. We'll put my information.
We'll put all the contact info.
Yeah, I'm here. And the other thing I just want to say really quick is that the number one thing to do, and this is good for people to know who's someone in their life has just been diagnosed with breast cancer, is called the Boobie Bible. I call it the Boobie Bible. It's not called the Boobie Bible. It's called the Breast Book, and it's by Dr. Love. And it is about 2 inches thick, and it's every single thing you need to know about breast cancer so that you have the information when you start going in for your appointments. So it's a super helpful tool, and I can't recommend it enough for anyone that's going through this.
I'll link all of this into my show notes. But Cassie, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for sharing this super vulnerable piece of yourself. I hope there are people out there that can benefit from this. Please reach out to me on Instagram or via email, because I do think that starting this community of people who can say, yes, I have survived this.
Yeah.
And yeah, it wasn't pretty, but I got through it. And I think it will only make all of us stronger and better for each other. And this whole idea of building a community around yourself as you're going through this really hard thing is going to be really challenging for a lot of us. Yeah. But knowing that it can gain a bigger, result, I think gives me a lot of confidence moving forward. Should this ever be me?
Yeah.
I mean, I do feel like I got to a point with COVID where I was far more terrified of my next mammogram than I was of getting COVID, to be honest. And this will continue as we get older to touch more and more women. And if we know how to help in the best way that we can, that can only good can come from that.
Yeah. And I mean, you're starting that. It's like your podcast that you've done has really shared so many people with the community, and just sharing this story in itself, hopefully will just, if there's just one person who got something from this, that's good for me.
Yeah, me too. Well, to anybody out there who's been recently diagnosed, we are with you.
Yeah.
And to anybody who's been touched by cancer, which is probably most of us, we are with you too.
Yeah.
So thanks for your time, Cass. I know it's valuable, and I just love you to pieces. And
right back at you, girl.
I'm going to be texting you till the end of time. So you're stuck now.
Thank you, ma'am.
Huge thanks to Cassie for showing up to this interview with her heart on her sleeve. It's vulnerability like this that will allow us to better help each other, and that's the whole point of being alive. Like I said at the beginning of the show, the weight of the world right now is slowing me down. It's making me reevaluate how I show up in the world, how I want things for my children, and how I want to exist in society as someone who takes action and helps. Starting with conversations like this one with Cassie is a way to start. The next show will be the last one in season 4, and I'm getting nostalgic. I am not the same person I was when I started this passion project 2.5 years ago. The gratitude I have for the people that have come onto this podcast and shared their truth with all of us is overwhelming. It's given me an opportunity to learn so much about the world around me, a world that I've been so ignorant to for so long. My eyes are starting to open, and I'm just so thankful to the experts around me who have generously said yes to a conversation. My last interview will be no exception. Please stay tuned in 2 weeks for a discussion that we all need to have. In the meantime, please dig deeper this week. Figure out a tangible way to help someone in your community. Close a loop with someone and ask a deeper question. You truly never know what's happening right in front of your face.